Fear is a funny thing. It doesn't scream. It whispers in the hum of a rusty radiator or the squeal of tires outside your window. For 4 years, a chubby bookkeeper from Chicago kept a secret that could burn down the underworld. But the devil always collects his dues. If you looked at me, you wouldn't see the kind of woman who belongs in a mobster's bed. I'm a big woman. I've always been fat, 230 pounds of soft curves, thick thighs, and a belly that I usually try to hide under oversized knit sweaters. I don't look like the sleek, diamond-draped supermodels that usually hang off the arms of powerful, dangerous men. I look like a regular, exhausted single mother living in a damp, sleepy logging town. Which is exactly what I was trying to be. For the last 3.5 years, Astoria, Oregon had been my sanctuary. Nestled at the mouth of the Columbia River, where it rains 200 days a year, it was the perfect place to wash away the sins of my past. I went by the name Chloe Davies now. I drove a dented 2012 Honda Civic, did freelance bookkeeping for local fisheries, and my biggest weekly thrill was finding coupons for the Safeway on Highway 30. My entire universe revolved around one tiny, perfect human being, my 3-year-old son, Leo. Leo was the reason I fled the glittering, blood-soaked streets of Chicago. Every time I looked at his face, my heart did a terrified little stutter. He had my button nose, but everything else, the sharp cut of his jaw, the thick, dark hair, and most terrifyingly, those piercing ice-blue eyes, belonged completely to Dominic Valenti. Dominic wasn't just a businessman. He was the underboss of the Valenti crime family, a man whose name was only spoken in hushed, terrified whispers in the back rooms of the Loop. When I first met Dominic, I was just a naive accountant, hired by a shell company, Vanguard Logistics, to audit their books. I was invisible to the world, a heavy girl who spent her lunches eating alone at her desk. But Dominic saw me. He didn't just see me. He devoured me. He cornered me in the server room late one Friday night, smelling of expensive leather gun oil and Tom Ford cologne. I thought he was going to kill me for noticing the discrepancies in his ledgers. Instead, he kissed me. For 6 months, we had a violently passionate secret affair. Dominic worshipped my body. He made me feel like a goddess, tracing the stretch marks on my hips like they were constellations, pulling me into the shadows of 5-star hotel suites and taking me with a possessive hunger I had never known. I fell in love with a monster, because to me, he was gentle, until the night I stayed late to drop off some paperwork at a warehouse in Cicero. I heard the screaming before I saw it. Through a cracked window, I watched Dominic. My Dominic, the man who kissed my forehead while I slept, beat a rival associate to death with a heavy steel wrench. The cold, dead look in his eyes as the man's skull caved in shattered my delusion. He wasn't a misunderstood businessman. He was a ruthless killer. The very next morning, a cheap drugstore test flashed 2 pink lines. I was pregnant with a mafia enforcer's child. If I stayed, my baby would be raised in blood. If I ran, Dominic would hunt me down. I chose to run. I packed a single duffel bag, drained my modest savings, and took a Greyhound bus halfway across the country. I thought I had succeeded. I thought the Pacific Northwest rain had erased my scent. I was wrong. It started on a random Tuesday in November. I was standing in the aisle at Safeway, comparing the prices of whole milk and tossing a box of cheddar goldfish into the cart. Leo was sitting in the buggy, babbling about a yellow dump truck. I turned around to grab a jar of peanut butter, and the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. A man in a sharp charcoal suit was standing near the bakery section. He wasn't buying anything. He was just looking at me. not with casual curiosity, but with the cold, calculating stare of a predator mapping out a cage. His suit was too expensive for Astoria. His posture was too rigid. Panic, cold and sharp, flooded my veins. I immediately abandoned the peanut butter, grabbed the cart, and practically ran to the self-checkout. My hands shook so badly, I dropped my debit card twice. "Mommy, why are we running?" Leo asked, his big blue eyes staring up at me. "Just a game, baby. We're playing race car," I lied, my voice trembling. I strapped him into his car seat in the Honda, locking the doors and peeling out of the parking lot. I checked my rearview mirror obsessively all the way down West Marine Drive. No one was following me. I let out a shaky breath, telling myself I was being paranoid. I was just a traumatized, heavy woman, letting her imagination run wild. But when I pulled onto my street, the blood drained completely from my face. Parked directly across from my duplex was a jet-black Mercedes G-Wagon with deeply tinted windows. The engine was off, but I could feel the malice radiating from it. It was completely out of place in a neighborhood of beat-up pickup trucks and rusted station wagons. My sanctuary was breached. The ghost of Chicago had followed me to the edge of the world. I didn't even pull into my driveway. I stomped on the gas, bypassing my house, my mind racing through a dozen contingency plans. Get to the bank. Withdraw whatever cash is left. Drive south to California. Change our names again. But the Honda's fuel light was glowing an angry orange, and I had exactly $30 in my checking account until Friday. I had no choice. I had to go inside, grab the emergency stash of cash I kept inside a hollowed-out dictionary, and get my go-bag. I circled the block, parking 2 streets away behind an overgrown hedge. I unbuckled Leo, hoisted his 30-pound weight onto my hip, and practically sprinted through the back alleys. My thighs burned, and my chest heaved. Carrying him while sprinting wasn't easy for me, but adrenaline is a hell of a drug. Shh, Leo. We have to be really, really quiet, I whispered, unlocking my back door with trembling hands. The house was completely dark. The air felt heavy static like the atmosphere right before a violent thunderstorm. I locked the deadbolt behind me, set Leo down in the living room, and handed him his favorite plush Paw Patrol toy. "Stay right here, baby. Mummy is going to pack some bags for a surprise vacation." I rushed into my bedroom, dropping to my knees. I pulled the heavy dictionary from under my bed, retrieving the $3,000 I had painstakingly saved over 3 years. I stuffed it into my bra, then reached into my closet for my Eddie Bauer duffel bag. "Going somewhere, Chloe?" The voice was a low, raspy baritone. It came from the shadows of my bedroom doorway. I dropped the bag. My heart literally stopped beating for a full second. I slowly turned around, my heavy breathing, the only sound in the suffocating silence. Dominic Valenti stepped out of the shadows. He looked older. The 4 years had carved harsh, cruel lines into his face. He was dressed impeccably as always, in a tailored black suit that hugged his broad, muscular shoulders. But his eyes, those terrifyingly calm, ice-blue eyes, were fixed on me with an intensity that made my knees buckle. "Dominic," I choked out, backing up until my spine hit the closet door. "You changed your hair," he observed, his voice eerily calm as he slowly walked toward me. He didn't look angry. He looked entirely lethally in control. "Brown suits you, but you kept the weight. I'm glad. I always loved how soft you were." "How did you find me?" I whispered, wrapping my arms around my stomach protectively. "You're a smart girl, Chloe. Smarter than most of the guys working on my payroll," Dominic said, stopping just inches away from me. The familiar scent of his cologne filled my lungs, bringing back a wave of intoxicating memories and pure terror. "But nobody stays invisible forever. You paid a dental bill 6 months ago. The clinic's third-party billing software routed through a server in Chicago. It took my guys 3 weeks to trace the IP, and another 5 to physically locate you. He reached out. I flinched, turning my face away, but his large, calloused hand simply cupped my jaw. His thumb stroked my cheekbone. The gentleness in his touch was entirely at odds with the monster I knew he was. "Why did you run, mia dolcezza?" he murmured, his voice dropping to a hypnotic whisper. "I tore Chicago apart looking for you. I burned down 2 rival factions because I thought they took you. I tortured men to death, trying to find a woman who simply packed a bag and bought a bus ticket. Why?" Tears spilled over my eyelashes. "Because I saw you, Dominic. I saw what you did behind the warehouse. I saw you cave that man's head in. You're a murderer." Dominic's eyes darkened, the warmth instantly vanishing. "I am what I have to be to survive. I never would have hurt you. I gave you everything. I worshipped the ground you walked on. You would have dragged me down into hell with you." I spat, finding a sudden, desperate surge of courage. I couldn't live in that world. "So you stole yourself from me," he said, his grip on my jaw tightening, just enough to let me know I couldn't pull away. "You sentenced me to 4 years of agony. I should punish you for that." Before I could respond, a small, sleepy voice drifted from the hallway. "Mummy, I thirsty." Dominic froze. His hand dropped from my face. Every muscle in his body turned to stone as he slowly turned his head toward the bedroom door. Standing in the hallway, dragging his Marshall the Dalmatian plushie on the floor, was Leo. The hallway light illuminated the toddler perfectly. He rubbed his eyes, looking up at the massive, terrifying stranger in his house. I lunged forward, trying to block Dominic's view, trying to shove him out of the way. "Don't look at him! Don't you dare look at him!" I screamed, the maternal instinct overriding my fear of death. But Dominic easily caught my wrists, pinning them behind my back with one hand while he stared at the little boy. The silence in the room was absolute. I could see the exact moment the math clicked in the mafia boss's head. He looked at Leo's dark hair. He looked at the shape of his jaw. And then he looked into the child's eyes, an exact, undeniable mirror of his own. Dominic's chest stopped moving. He released my wrists, taking a slow, staggering step back. For the first time since I had known him, the ruthless, cold-blooded enforcer of the Valenti crime family looked completely, utterly terrified. "Mommy, who is the big man?" Leo asked, tilting his head. Dominic slowly turned his head to look at me. The betrayal in his eyes was so profound, it made my stomach churn. The calculating predator was gone, replaced by a father who had just realized he missed the first 3 years of his son's life. "You didn't just steal yourself from me, Chloe," Dominic whispered, his voice trembling with a terrifying, quiet rage. "You stole my air." The world didn't end with a bang or a scream. It ended with the soft click of my front door shutting behind us. Dominic didn't yell. He didn't pull a weapon. Instead, the ruthless underboss of the Chicago syndicate dropped slowly to his knees on the cheap linoleum floor of my rental. He didn't care about the dust ruining his $5,000 suit. He just stared at Leo with a raw, shattered expression that terrified me more than his anger ever could. "Hi," Leo chirped, completely unfazed by the tension suffocating the room. He reached out with a sticky, juice-stained hand and patted Dominic's pristine lapel. "I'm Leo. I have a fire truck." A ragged sound, something between a laugh and a sob, tore from Dominic's throat. His massive, trembling hands reached out, hesitating for a fraction of a second, before gently gripping Leo's tiny shoulders. "Leo," he whispered, tasting the name like it was a sacred prayer. You are beautiful. You're perfect." He looked up at me, the vulnerability in his ice-blue eyes hardening back into obsidian glass. "Pack your bags, Chloe. You have 10 minutes. Take only what he needs. Everything else will be bought new." "Dominic, please." I begged, tears streaming down my face. You can't take us back there. You can be part of his life, but we can't live in Chicago. The violence. You don't have a choice." His voice cracked like a whip, silencing me instantly. He took a deep, steadying breath, forcefully reining in his temper for the boy standing between us. "The man you saw in the grocery store today, the one in the charcoal suit." I nodded, my throat tight. "Your scout, the one who tracked my dental bill." "My scout tracked you digitally," Dominic corrected his voice, dropping to a lethal whisper. "But my men didn't arrive in Oregon until an hour ago. The man you saw in Safeway was Lorenzo Ricci. He's a contract killer for the Moretti Syndicate." The floor seemed to drop out from beneath me. My lungs forgot how to pull in air. The Morettis found out I was bleeding, the city dry, looking for a woman? Dominic continued standing up and pulling his phone from his pocket. "They didn't know who you were, but they knew you were my weakness. They tracked my digital footprint to Astoria. If I hadn't pushed my pilot to fly through a storm front to get here tonight, Ricci would have followed you home. You and my son would already be dead." I was completely paralyzed. The illusion of my safe, quiet life shattered into a million jagged pieces. I hadn't been hiding. I had been sitting on a powder keg, entirely defenseless. 2 hours later, we were in the air. We flew out of a private airfield in Portland on a Gulfstream G650. I sat huddled in a plush leather seat, clutching a sleeping Leo to my chest. Dominic sat across from us, nursing a glass of scotch, his eyes never leaving our faces. He was a predator, guarding his den, watching my every breath. By sunrise, we landed in Illinois. But we didn't go back to Dominic's penthouse in the city. A convoy of black SUVs drove us to a heavily fortified, sprawling estate deep in Lake Forest, completely hidden behind wrought-iron gates and ancient oak trees. Men with visible shoulder holsters patrolled the grounds. "Welcome home," Dominic said, coldly, as the heavy mahogany doors swung open. My new life was a gilded cage. For the first 2 weeks, I wasn't allowed to leave the master wing of the estate. Dominic hired a small army of nannies, private chefs and tutors for Leo, showering the boy with vintage train sets, custom-made clothes, and a level of adoration that bordered on obsession. Leo, innocent and adaptable, immediately worshipped his new papa. For me, the treatment was far more complex. I was furious, terrified, and deeply ashamed of how quickly my body still responded to Dominic's proximity. He was a tyrant, controlling my schedule, my meals and my security. Yet in the quiet hours of the night, when the house was asleep, the ruthless mafia boss would slip into my room. He didn't force himself on me. Instead, he would sit on the edge of the mattress, running his warm hands over my thick thighs and soft stomach, with a desperate, starved reverence. "You hide yourself in these massive sweaters," he murmured one night, his knuckles brushing against my cheek. "The wives of my captains, they starve themselves. They inject poison into their faces to look like plastic dolls. But you, Chloe, you are real. Every soft inch of you is mine. I will burn the world down before I let anyone make you feel less than a queen." His words were intoxicating, a venomous syrup that seeped into my insecurities and made me feel terrifyingly powerful. He hired private seamstresses from Milan to come to the estate, forcing them to measure my plus-size frame and craft custom silk dresses, cashmere coats, and tailored trousers that hugged my curves perfectly. For a fat girl who had spent her life trying to shrink into the background, being dressed and worshipped like royalty was a dangerous psychological game. But the reality of who he was always lurked in the shadows. I overheard the hushed conversations in his study. I learned that Dominic's father, the Don, had recently passed away. The syndicate was fractured. Dominic was no longer just the underboss. He was fighting a bloody clandestine war for the head of the table. and my presence the sudden appearance of a secret heir and an unapproved, unblooded woman was causing dissent among his most loyal captains, particularly with Vincent Castellano, his oldest advisor. "She is a liability, Dominic," I heard Vincent hiss one afternoon from behind the heavy oak doors of the study. "She's a soft civilian. The Morettis know she exists now. They know about the boy. If you don't send them away to Sicily, they will be used against you. Or worse, my men will start questioning your judgment. If any of your men question my judgment, Vincent, I will send you their tongues in a velvet box." Dominic's voice replied cold and dead. "Chloe stays. The boy stays. They are untouchable. But in the underworld, no one is untouchable. And the devil was about to collect his dues. The storm hit on a Tuesday in mid-December. A massive blizzard had buried Lake Forest in 2 feet of snow, knocking out the power lines to the main road. The estate was running on backup generators, casting eerie, flickering shadows across the marble hallways. I was in the East Wing playroom reading a story to Leo, who was curled up in his dinosaur pajamas. Dominic was supposed to be in a meeting downtown, having taken heavily armored vehicles through the snow an hour earlier. Suddenly the backup lights cut out. The estate plunged into absolute darkness. The heavy, comforting silence of the snowstorm was shattered by a deafening crack that echoed from the front gates. It wasn't thunder. It was an explosive charge. My blood turned to ice. Adrenaline, sharp and painful, exploded in my chest. "Mummy, it's dark," Leo whimpered, clutching my sweater. "I know, baby. We're going to play hide and seek right now," I said, my voice eerily calm. The panicked crying girl who fled Chicago 4 years ago was gone. In her place was a mother defending her cub. I scooped Leo up, ignoring the burning in my thighs as I sprinted down the pitch-black hallway. Gunfire erupted from the first floor, the rapid, terrifying stutter of automatic weapons. Men were shouting in Italian. Glass shattered. Dominic's men were fighting back, but there were too many attackers. The Morettis had chosen their moment perfectly. Vincent Castellano had sold us out. He had leaked the weakness in our security grid to the rival family, hoping to eliminate the civilian liability and take control of the syndicate himself. I reached the master suite and kicked the door shut, locking the heavy deadbolt. I rushed to the walk-in closet, shoving aside rows of custom silk dresses to reach the hidden panel Dominic had shown me on my first night here. Behind it was a reinforced steel panic room. I pushed Leo inside. "Do not come out, Leo. Put your hands over your ears and close your eyes. Mommy loves you." "Mommy, come in," he cried. "I can't close it from the inside, baby. I have to protect the door." I kissed his forehead, slammed the heavy steel door shut, and spun the locking wheel. He was safe, but I wasn't. Heavy footsteps pounded up the grand staircase. They were clearing the rooms one by one. I looked around the dark, luxurious bedroom. I was 230 pounds of soft curves. I had no combat training. I was terrified. But I remembered the cold, heavy metal Dominic kept in the nightstand drawer. I scrambled to the bed, opening the drawer and pulling out the matte black Glock 19. My hands shook violently as I racked the slide just like Dominic had forced me to practice at the indoor range last week. Click. The bedroom door handle jiggled. Then a massive boot kicked the door right near the lock. The wood splintered. Another kick, and the door flew open, hitting the wall with a sickening crash. A man in a tactical vest stepped into the room. He had a flashlight mounted to his rifle, the beam sweeping across the bed, illuminating my terrified face. "Found the fat bitch," he barked into a radio strapped to his shoulder. "Looking for the kid." He raised his rifle, aiming it squarely at my chest. "Where's the boy? I didn't scream. I didn't beg." I looked at the man who came to murder my child, and a primal, terrifying rage completely swallowed my fear. I raised the Glock with both hands, squeezed my eyes half shut, and pulled the trigger. The recoil snapped my wrists back. The gunshot was deafening in the enclosed space. I didn't fire once. I kept pulling the trigger, screaming at the top of my lungs, emptying the magazine until the gun clicked empty. When I finally opened my eyes, the man was on the floor. He wasn't moving. I dropped the gun, my knees giving out as I collapsed onto the thick carpet, gasping for air. The sounds of fighting downstairs had abruptly stopped. Heavy, frantic footsteps thundered down the hallway. "Chloe," Dominic burst into the room. He was covered in snow and blood. His tailored coat was torn, and he held a submachine gun in one hand. He took in the scene, the shattered door, the dead assassin on the floor, and me sitting against the wall, shaking violently. He dropped his weapon and fell to his knees beside me, his large hands frantically checking my body for bullet holes. "Are you hit, Chloe? Look at me. Are you hit? I killed him." I choked out, staring at my trembling hands. "Leo is in the panic room." Dominic looked at the dead man, then back at me. The terror in his eyes slowly morphed into something else. It was awe. It was a dark, reverent pride. He pulled me into his massive chest, wrapping his arms around me so tightly I could barely breathe. "You saved him," Dominic whispered into my hair, his voice breaking. "You saved our son. You are a queen, Chloe. My beautiful, fierce queen." "Vincent!" I gasped into his bloody shirt. "Vincent betrayed you. I heard them shouting his name downstairs." Dominic's body went completely rigid. The warmth vanished, replaced by the lethal, calculating monster I had fled 4 years ago. But this time I didn't pull away. "Vincent will die screaming before the sun comes up," Dominic stated flatly. He pulled back, looking deeply into my eyes. "I will burn this entire city to ash to keep you safe. But you have to stop running, Chloe. You belong to me. You belong to this family." I looked at the blood on his hands, then at the dead man on my floor. I realized then that there was no escaping the dark. The Pacific Northwest hadn't saved me. Hiding my body, my past, and my child hadn't saved me. The only way to survive the monsters was to stand beside the most terrifying one of all. "I'm not running anymore," I whispered, reaching up to wipe a smear of blood from his cheek. "But if I stay, I am not just a captive. I am not a liability." Dominic smiled a chilling, beautiful predator's smile. He kissed my palm, his blue eyes blazing with absolute devotion. "You are the Donna of the Valenti family," he vowed, his voice echoing in the blood-soaked room. "And God help anyone who ever disrespects you again." Did Chloe's terrifying journey keep you on the edge of your seat? The underworld is full of dark secrets, and this is just one of many true-life tales of survival, devotion, and dangerous men. If you loved this intense mafia romance drama, please hit that like button and share this video with your friends who crave dark storytelling. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications